right, guys, let's jump into another deep dive. You guys wanted us to unpack this whole thing with covert contracts in marriage.
Yeah.
And, you know, how that ties into the red pill and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And we thought, you know what, better way to do that than to take a look at this book, Beyond Feminism, Restoring Balance in Institutions, by Conrad Reicher.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be a good one.
So,
I'm excited for this one.
yeah, me too.
This book is pretty intense.
It is.
Yeah.
It covers a lot of ground.
Yeah, it's going to give us a lot to talk about in this deep dive. So Riker, he really goes deep into, like, the history of feminism.
Yeah, he lays it all out.
Yeah.
Like from the very beginning with, like, you know, first wave feminism and like the suffragettes and all that. And, you know, he goes through all the waves and like he even talks about like intersectionality and all that stuff.
Yeah, he doesn't pull any punches. He kind of goes there.
He goes there.
Which I appreciate.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of curious, like, what was your take on, like, how all that, like, historical stuff connects to, like, what guys are dealing with today? Like, how does that actually, like, play out in the real world?
Well, okay, so like one thing that really struck me was how Riker talks about this shift in feminism.
Okay.
Like how, you know, the early feminists were fighting for like basic rights, you know, like the right to vote and own property and stuff.
The essential
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly. Like stuff that like obviously like needed to happen.
Yeah.
But he's saying that like over time, the movement's focus kind of changed.
Yeah.
And like, especially with the rise of like academic feminism.
Yeah.
You know, that's when things started to get a little more.
A little more theoretical.
Yeah. Like a little more
Heady.
And like, he argues that they started seeing like every societal structure through this lens of like power and balance.
Yeah.
And like men were always cast as like the oppressor.
Always the bad guy.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
Like, and you know, that's something that I've definitely seen like on the subreddit a lot. Like this idea that all men are like inherently privileged just because they're men.
Right, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah. And it's like,
That there's no nuance there.
no, it's just like,
Men are born on third base.
yeah. And they just like automatically have all these advantages. And it's like, even, I don't know if that's always the case.
I don't know either.
It seems a little
Poorly simplistic.
Yeah, and Riker kind of argues that too.
Yeah.
He says that even though the intentions might be good, this kind of like generalization can actually be really harmful.
Oh, yeah.
Because it like ignores the nuance of individual situations.
Exactly.
And like he points to some pretty controversial topics as example, like the wage gap debate.
Oh, boy.
And the whole idea of toxic masculinity.
Those are always...
Like those are like hot button issues.
Yeah.
And he uses them to show how this oversimplification, you know, like this lack of nuance can really kind of backfire.
Yeah. It can create more problems than it solves sometimes.
For sure.
And speaking of creating problems, this marriage plantation thing.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's a loaded term.
Yeah, it is.
What's his deal with that? What's he talking about there?
So basically, he's using that term to describe what he sees as like this system where men are basically getting the short end of the stick in marriage.
Okay.
And he thinks it's because of all this stuff that's like been influenced by feminist ideology, like laws, social expectations, the whole 9 yards.
So he's saying like even though, you know, we've made all this progress with equality and all that, he's saying that there are still these like underlying structures that are kind of working against men,
That's his argument.
especially in marriage.
Especially in marriage.
Interesting. And he's not just talking about like, you know, feeling emasculated or
He's
whatever.
talking about real tangible consequences.
Like what?
Like financial ruin, for example.
Oh.
He specifically calls out no-fault divorce laws
Oh.
as like a prime example of how this stuff plays out.
Okay, I can see where he's going with that. I know a lot of guys who feel like those laws basically give women all the power in a divorce.
Yeah, and he would agree with that.
Like they could just initiate a divorce without having to prove any fault.
Right.
And the guy's left holding the bag.
Pretty much.
Wow. Okay, so that's a pretty bleak outlook on marriage.
It's not all sunshine and roses in Riker's world.
No, not really.
yeah.
But I mean, does he have any solution? Or is it just like avoid marriage at all costs?
Well, he definitely critiques the traditional setup, but he does offer up some alternatives.
Okay, I'm listening.
He talks about things like cohabitation agreements where couples like really spell out their financial responsibilities and like what happens to their assets if they split up.
Oh, so it's like a prenup, but for people who aren't getting married?
Exactly. It's all about creating more transparency from the get-go.
Okay, I can see how that could be helpful.
He also even brings up polyamorous relationship.
Whoa, okay, now we're getting into some uncharted territory.
A little bit, yeah. But his point is that like the traditional monogamous setup might not work for everyone.
And that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. He's just encouraging people to think outside the box and find what works best for them.
I like that. So it's not about demonizing marriage entirely.
No, it's about being more conscious of the power dynamics that are at play.
And finding ways to create more balance.
That's the key.
Okay.
Cool.
So we've talked about marriage. Now let's talk about kids.
Oh boy. This is where it gets really interesting.
I know Riker has some pretty strong opinions about how boys are being raised these days.
He does. He thinks the education system is failing boys in a major way.
Okay, I'm ready to hear all about it.
Buckle up. So yeah, Riker's whole thing is that there's been this like feminization of education.
Okay.
And he thinks it's actually putting boys at a disadvantage.
Okay, I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, I gotta say.
Yeah.
What exactly does he mean by, like, feminization, though?
Well, it's not that he like thinks women shouldn't be teachers or anything. It's more about the fact that like the vast majority of teachers, especially in public schools, are women.
Oh, I see.
Like he throws out this stat that something like 76% of teachers in the US are women.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and his argument is that like because of that, like the whole teaching style, whole school environment, it just might not be the best fit for how boys learn.
Okay, I mean, I can see where he's coming from with that. Boys and girls are different,
Yeah.
They learn differently, interact with the world differently.
Exact. And like boys tend to be more physically active,
Oh, yeah.
more impulsive.
Huh?
They kind of thrive in environments that are more competitive,
Yeah.
more hands-on.
Yeah, like they need to move around.
Yeah, they need to like,
Energy out.
Exactly. And he's saying that like the way schools are now, with all the emphasis on like emotional intelligence
Yeah.
and collaborative learning and all that stuff, it's like it's not bad,
Yeah.
but it might not play to boys' strengths.
Right. Like it's not really tapping into like how they naturally learn.
It's accident.
And he also talks about those zero tolerance policies, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like how those can actually end up backfiring with boys.
Big time.
Because boys are just like,
More rambunctious.
yeah, more likely to roughhouse and like test boundaries.
Yeah. And it's like you're trying to punish them for just being boys.
Exactly. And it's not just about behavior.
Yeah.
Like he also looks at the curriculum itself and he's like, are we even teaching boys the stuff that they're actually interested in?
Yeah, he thinks a lot of the stuff that used to appeal to boys has been kind of pushed aside.
Like what?
Well, he doesn't really get into specifics, but he kind of implies that, like, maybe there's less emphasis on things like hands-on activity,
Yeah, okay.
shop class, stuff like that.
Yeah, I see.
And more emphasis on, like,
Like book learning.
yeah, like more theoretical stuff.
Yeah.
Which might not be as engaging for a lot of boys.
Right. And then there's that whole thing about ADHD.
Oh, yeah.
Like he even brings up how ADHD diagnoses are way more common in boys.
Way more common.
And he's kind of questioning whether we're just like too quick to label boys as having a disorder.
Yeah, like maybe they're not actually disorders.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just
Boys.
Being boys.
Yeah. Like maybe they just need a different kind of environment to thrive in.
Exactly. He wonders if we're like medicalizing boyhood.
Interesting.
It's a pretty thought-provoking idea.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've got this like feminization happening in school,
Right.
but how does that connect to this whole like demonization of masculinity thing that we were talking about earlier?
Well, he sees it as part of the same trend.
Okay.
Like he's saying that it's not just in schools, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Like all these traditional masculine traits, they're being scrutinized, they're being labeled as toxic.
Right. Like it's almost like guys can't win.
Yeah.
Like they're told to be strong, but not too aggressive.
Right.
Be sensitive,
Yeah.
express your emotion, but don't be weak.
Right. Don't be a wimp.
It's like, what are they supposed to do?
It's a tough line to walk.
It really is.
And Riker calls it a double bind.
Okay.
Like men are constantly getting mixed messages about what it means to be a man.
Yeah. And he uses that Gillette ad campaign as an example, right?
Oh, yeah. The one that tried to tackle toxic masculinity.
Yeah, but it ended up causing a ton of backlash.
Big time. And he's like, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Like it was trying to do a good thing.
Yeah.
But it just came across as like,
attacking all men.
yeah. And he's saying that kind of messaging just alienates men.
Yeah, it makes them feel like they're the enemy.
Right. And he's worried that this whole like demonization of masculinity is actually having some serious consequences for men's mental health.
Oh, absolutely. He points to some pretty alarming stats.
Like what?
Like men having much shorter lifespans than women.
Really?
Yeah, and they're way more likely to die by suicide.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And he thinks it's because of all this pressure that society puts on men.
Like to be strong.
To be providers,
Yeah.
to never show weakness.
Yeah. And he even uses this term Superman syndrome
Yeah.
to describe how men feel like they have to just keep pushing through.
Yeah, bottle it all up.
Never ask for help.
Never show any vulnerability.
And that can't be good for their mental health.
No,
Yeah,
it's a recipe for disaster.
So what's the solution?
Well, Riker thinks we need to create a culture where men feel comfortable being vulnerable.
Okay.
Where they feel comfortable asking for help.
Yeah.
Where they have strong support systems.
Yeah, like we were saying earlier, men are often conditioned to go it alone.
Yeah.
But that's not healthy.
No, it's not.
So we need to encourage men to reach out.
Absolutely. To connect with each other.
Yeah, to support each other.
To build strong friendships and mentorships.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about the problem.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about solution. What does Riker propose we do about all of this. So where do we go from here? Like, what does he actually suggest we do about all this stuff?
Well, he talks about a bunch of things. Actually, one area he gets into that we haven't really touched on yet is the legal system.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when it comes to family law and domestic violence cases.
Okay.
He's got some pretty strong opinions about that.
I bet. Like, what's his take?
He basically thinks the system is rigged against men.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Does he have anything to back that up, or is it just like a hunch?
Oh, no, he's got plenty of evidence. He throws out a lot of statistics and anecdotes that suggest that men are basically assumed guilty until proven innocent.
Yikes. Especially in divorce cases.
Yeah, divorce, custody, disputes, allegations of domestic violence, you name it.
Yeah. I've heard some pretty crazy stories on the subreddit about guys getting totally screwed over in those situations.
Oh, yeah, it happens all the time. And he even brings up this concept of paternity fraud.
Oh, yeah. That's a tough one.
Yeah, where a guy is forced to pay child support for a kid that isn't even his biological.
That's messed up.
It is. And he sees it as a major injustice.
Yeah, I can see why.
And he's also really critical of how domestic violence cases are handled.
Okay.
He says that men are often denied due process, and they face really harsh penalties, even in situations where they might have been acting in self-defense.
Wow. So it's like he's saying that the legal system kind of reinforces that whole marriage plantation.
Like, it's just another way that men are getting trapped.
Yeah, and he's not a fan of no-fault divorce laws either.
No, not at all. He thinks they've made it way too easy for women to initiate divorce and get a favorable settlement, often at the expense of the man's well-being.
It's a pretty bleak picture.
It can be.
Yeah.
But he does offer some hope.
Okay, good. Because I was starting to get a little depressed.
Yeah. No, he doesn't just leave it at that.
Okay.
He actually provides some advice for how men can navigate this landscape.
Okay. Give me the good stuff.
Well, first and foremost, he says be aware.
Okay.
Like, educate yourself about your legal rights. Be cautious about getting married
Right.
without a really clear understanding of the potential consequences.
Yep.
And consider those alternative relationship models that we talked about.
Right, like cohabitation agreements or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. If those seem like a better fit.
Okay. So it's all about going into things with your eyes wide open.
Yeah. Forewarned is forearmed.
I like that.
Yeah.
But it's not just about being defensive either.
Yeah.
He also wants men to be proactive.
Absolutely.
Get involved in politics.
Yeah. Advocate for policy changes.
Support organizations that are fighting for men's rights.
All of that.
Yeah.
Not just complaining about the system.
Exactly. Make your voice heard.
I love it. And he also talks a lot about the importance of building strong support networks.
Oh, yeah.
Like having strong male friendships and mentorships.
That's huge.
Yeah, because men often feel like they have to go it alone.
Yeah, to bottle everything up.
And that's not healthy.
No, it's not.
So we need to encourage men to reach out, to connect with each other.
Yeah, create those spaces where they can be vulnerable.
Yeah, and support each other.
Absolutely. It's all about brotherhood.
I like that. It's like that old saying, iron sharpens iron.
Exactly. And he also encourages men to be active in their community.
Like volunteer, mentor younger guys, you know, find ways to make a positive impact.
So it's about taking responsibility.
Yeah, for yourself and for others.
Yeah, I can dig it. It's like reclaiming masculinity in a positive way.
That's the goal.
Awesome. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
But I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this book.
Yeah, there's so much more we could talk about.
I know, but unfortunately we're out of time.
Yeah, sadly.
But if you guys want to dive deeper into this stuff,
Definitely should.
you can find Beyond Feminism, Restoring Balance in Institutions by Conrad Riker on Amazon Kindle and Google Playbooks.
Check it out.
It's a really thought-provoking read.
It is.
And, as always, keep those deep dive requests coming.
Yeah, we love hearing from you guys.
We're here to help you navigate this crazy world.
Until next time.
Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep the conversation going.